The silver dome of Astra 5 gleamed against the inky blackness of space, a solitary beacon orbiting Mercury's barren landscape. Inside, Dr. Orion Hale, Riker to the few who knew him well, hunched over a holographic display, his weathered hands steady despite the excitement coursing through his veins. "Shadow, come here, boy," he called, his voice echoing through the sterile laboratory. A sleek, midnight black canine padded silently across the polished floor, amber eyes reflecting an intelligence far beyond that of Earth's ancient companions. Shadow wasn't just any dog, he was Riker's masterpiece, a genetically enhanced being with cognitive abilities that bordered on human. "Today's the day," Riker whispered, scratching behind Shadow's ears. "The final sequence is ready." Shadow tilted his head, a gesture so familiar yet now laden with new meaning. After months of work, Riker had developed a genetic therapy that would allow Shadow to sense human emotions, a breakthrough that could revolutionize interspecies communication. "Hey, hold still," Riker murmured, pressing a small device against Shadow's neck. There was a soft hiss, and the dog blinked several times as the nanobots carried the genetic modifications through his bloodstream. "There we go. How do you feel?" Shadow's amber eyes fixed on Riker's face with newfound intensity. For a moment, neither moved. Then Shadow pressed his muzzle against Riker's palm, a low whine escaping his throat. "You can feel it, can't you?" Riker's voice cracked. "The worry, the hope?" Shadow's tail wagged once, confirmation enough. Riker laughed, tears pricking at the corners of his eyes. In the 2 years since the great asteroid crisis had decimated Earth, leaving humanity struggling to rebuild within the newly formed Galactic Alliance, Shadow had been his only constant companion. Now, they shared something even deeper. "We should celebrate," Riker said, rising from his chair. "Real meat tonight, not that synthesized garbage, and maybe even a—" The station's alarm cut through his words, a piercing wail that sent Shadow into a defensive crouch. "Warning, unauthorized vessels approaching. Security breach imminent. All personnel proceed to emergency stations." Riker's celebration evaporated. "Computer, visual." The holographic display shifted, showing 3 ships of unfamiliar design hurtling toward Astra 5. They moved with predatory grace, their hulls painted with the unmistakable crimson symbol of the Void Hoof Raiders, space pirates who had emerged from the chaos following the crisis. "Damn it," Riker hissed, fingers flying across the interface. "Computer, initiate emergency protocol Delta. Encrypt all research files and prepare for remote transfer." "Protocol Delta initiated," the AI responded coolly. Riker turned to Shadow, who was watching him with those newly empathic eyes. "We need to move. The safe room. Now." They raced through the corridors, emergency lights bathing everything in crimson. Shadow kept pace easily, his enhanced physique allowing him to move with preternatural speed. "A docking breach detected in Sector 7, the computer announced. "Security containment failing." Riker cursed under his breath. Sector 7 was too close for comfort. The safe room was still 2 sections away. "Shadow, we need to—" His words died as the corridor ahead filled with armored figures. The raiders had boarded faster than anticipated. Riker pressed himself against the wall, pulling Shadow close. "Back, back," he whispered, but it was too late. "Well, well," a voice drawled from within the lead raider's helmet. "What have we here? A scientist and his pet?" The figure stepped forward, armor gleaming under the emergency lights. "Dr. Orion Hale, I presume? Your reputation precedes you." The raider removed his helmet, revealing a face that sent a jolt of recognition through Riker. Captain Kane Vorther, nicknamed Black Star for the distinctive void black implant replacing his left eye, was one of the most notorious pirates in the solar system. "We're here for your research, Doctor," Blackstar said, his artificial eyes scanning Riker methodically. "The genetic modifications. Specifically, hand over your data, and we might let you live." Shadow growled, sensing Riker's fear and anger. The sound made Blackstar laugh. "Interesting specimen," he remarked, nodding toward Shadow. "Enhanced, clearly, part of your research?" Riker remained silent, mind racing. The data was already being encrypted and transferred to the Galactic Alliance's secure servers. If he could stall long enough. "Not the talkative type?" Blackstar sighed. "Search the lab," he ordered his men. "Find the research, and bring the dog." "No," Riker lunged forward but was immediately restrained by two raiders. "Leave him alone," Shadow snarled, launching himself at the raider reaching for him. His teeth found purchase in the man's armored forearm, enhanced jaw strength leaving dents in the metal. "Feisty," Blackstar observed. Then, with casual cruelty, he drew his weapon and fired. The energy blast caught Shadow mid-leap, sending him crashing to the floor. Riker's scream echoed through the corridor as he fought against his captors, desperation giving him strength he didn't know he possessed. "Shadow!" He broke free, rushing to his companion's side. The dog's breathing was labored, blood seeping from the wound in his side. Captain," one of the raiders called from the lab. "The data's being transferred out. We can't stop it." Blackstar's expression darkened. "Time to go. Bring the doctor. He knows the research better than any data file." "I'm not going anywhere," Riker snarled, cradling Shadow's head. Shadow's eyes, dimming but still alert, fixed on Riker's face. The dog whined softly, and Riker felt something, a wave of emotion not his own. Fear. Pain. But also a warning. Shadow's muzzle moved, and in a voice barely above a whisper, the result of genetic modifications that had given him limited speech capabilities, he said, "We, not alone, among stars." Then his amber eyes clouded over, and Shadow went still in Riker's arms. The silence that followed was broken by Blackstar's cold voice. Touching, but ultimately useless. "Now, Dr. Hale, you have a choice. Come with us, or join your dog." Riker looked up, tears streaming down his face. In that moment, something inside him, something he had buried years ago, awakened. The scientist receded, and the soldier he had once been surged forward. "I'll come," he said, voice deadly calm. "But understand this, Blackstar. You've just made the biggest mistake of your life." As the raiders led him away, Riker cast one last look at Shadow's still form. His whispered promise hung in the air. "They killed my dog, and the stars will burn for it." The raider ship cut through space like a blade, its engines leaving a trail of ionized particles that glowed faintly in the vacuum. Inside, Riker sat in a cramped cell, his hands bound with energy cuffs that hummed softly in the dim light. His mind, however, was far from bound. Images of Shadow flickered through his consciousness. The loyal companion who had been with him through the darkest days after the crisis, when Earth had teetered on the brink of annihilation. Shadow, who had been more than a pet, more than an experiment, a friend in a universe where Riker had precious few. And now he was gone. Grief gave way to guilt, sharp and piercing. If he hadn't been so caught up in his research, if he had better security protocols in place. The what-ifs were endless, a labyrinth of regret with no exit. But beneath the guilt lay something else. Something Riker had thought long buried, the cold, calculating rage of the soldier he had once been. Before becoming a geneticist, Orion Hale had been Lieutenant Commander Hale of the Earth Defense Forces. Elite training, enhanced reflexes, expertise in tactics and survival, all hidden beneath the veneer of a mild-mannered scientist. Hidden, but not forgotten. He had left that life behind when he'd refused to participate in military gene-splicing experiments that crossed ethical lines. His objections had led to his discharge, honorable on paper, but effectively in exile. Science had been his refuge, his way to use genetic modification for healing rather than harm. Yet here he was, a prisoner of pirates who had killed the one being in the universe he truly cared for. The irony was bitter. The cell door slid open, interrupting his thoughts. Blackstar entered, his void eye gleaming in the low light. "Dr. Hale," he said as if greeting a colleague, "I trust your accommodations are adequate." Riker didn't respond, studying the pirate captain with the detached assessment of a soldier. Blackstar was tall, well-built, with the enhanced musculature typical of space-adapted humans. The void eye was military-grade tech, likely stolen. His left hand bore subtle scarring, nerve damage, possibly. Not talkative, understandable. Blackstar continued, seemingly unperturbed by Riker's silence. The loss of a pet can be distressing. At this, Riker's control slipped. He wasn't a pet. Blackstar smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. "No? A friend, then. How quaint." "What do you want with my research?" Riker asked, channeling his anger into focus. "Direct. I appreciate that." Blackstar leaned against the cell wall. "Your work on emotional transference between species is groundbreaking. Imagine the applications. Enhanced soldiers who can sense fear in their enemies. Interrogators who can feel deception." "That wasn't the purpose." "Purpose is subjective, Doctor." Blackstar interrupted. "You saw potential for communication, understanding. Others see weapons." "Others like you?" "Like my employers." Blackstar's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "The raiders are mercenaries, Doctor. We go where the money is. And right now, the money is in genetic weaponry." Riker's mind raced. The Alliance banned military gene modifications after the crisis. The Alliance is idealistic, naive. Blackstar's voice hardened. They believe in peace through diplomacy, as if the crisis taught us nothing about the harshness of the universe. "And who are your employers? Private military, black market?" Blackstar smiled again. "That would be telling." He straightened. "Rest, Doctor. Tomorrow, you'll help us understand your research, particularly how you achieved emotional transference without neural degradation." "And if I refuse?" The captain's void eye gleamed. "Let's just say, compared to what would happen, your dog got the merciful option." After Blackstar left, Riker sat motionless, his scientist's mind cataloging facts, his soldier's mind formulating plans. The raiders wanted his research, which meant they needed him alive. For now, he closed his eyes, letting his enhanced senses map the ship around him. The hum of engines, the footsteps of guards, the recycled air flowing through vents. Every piece of information was a potential advantage. Shadow's final words echoed in his mind. "We not alone among stars." What had he meant? Was it just the delirium of death or something more? Riker had always believed that humanity was the only intelligent species in their solar system. But Shadow had sensed. What? The question would have to wait. First, he needed to escape. Then, he would hunt down Blackstar and whoever employed him. Justice for Shadow, vengeance for himself. Riker flexed his hands within the energy cuffs, feeling the old, familiar tension of muscles preparing for combat. The scientist was still there, analytical and precise, but the soldier was awake now, and he had a mission. Somewhere in the depths of space, a single tear escaped Riker's eye. Not of sadness, but of resolve. The hunt had begun. The Alliance cruiser Stellar Aegis cut through the darkness of space with precision that spoke of military efficiency. On its bridge, Captain Lyra Sol stood with her hands clasped behind her back, her gaze fixed on the holographic display showing the last known coordinates of Astra 5. "A report," she commanded, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone who had earned her rank rather than inherited it. Lieutenant Vega looked up from his console. "Confirmed raid on Astra 5 research station. Captain, 1 fatality, non-human. 1 missing, Dr. Orion Hale, geneticist. Station's primary data banks were encrypted and transferred before the raiders could access them." "O Voidhoof raiders?" Lyra asked, though she already knew the answer. "A vessel signatures match, yes. 3 ships, standard formation." Lyra's mouth tightened. The raiders had been a thorn in the Alliance's side for months, striking isolated outposts and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. But kidnapping a leading scientist? That was an escalation. What was Dr. Hale working on that would interest the raiders? Lieutenant Vega hesitated. "That's classified, Captain. Need-to-know basis." Lyra turned, fixing the young officer with a stare that had made hardened space veterans fidget. "Lieutenant, we're tracking dangerous criminals who have abducted an Alliance citizen. I need to know." The lieutenant swallowed. "Yes, Captain. Dr. Hale was developing genetic modifications for enhanced interspecies emotional communication. The subject was a canine with already enhanced cognitive abilities." The fatality, Lyra realized. "Yes, Captain. The dog, designation Shadow, was killed during the raid." Lyra frowned. Genetic research was strictly regulated after the crisis, with military applications outright banned. But emotional communication didn't sound like a weapon. Unless... "Get me everything on Dr. Hale, background, research history, personal connections, everything." "Yes, Captain." As the bridge crew bustled around her, Lyra studied the holographic representation of the raided station. Pirates didn't typically target research facilities unless the potential profit outweighed the risk. What made Dr. Hale's work so valuable? Hours later, secluded in her quarters, Lyra scrolled through Dr. Orion Hale's file. What she found was interesting. Born to farmers in what had once been the American Midwest, brilliant from childhood, doctorate in genetic engineering by 25. Military service with the Earth Defense Forces, that was unexpected. Discharged following ethical disagreements over military gene splicing. Since then, civilian research focused on healing applications of genetic modification. The file included a grainy image, Hale with his research subject. Shadow. The dog was sleek, black as space itself, with eyes that seemed to hold more intelligence than many humans Lyra had encountered. Further digging revealed something else curious. Captain Kane Blackstar Vorther had applied for permits to test genetic weapons 3 years ago. His application had been denied by a review committee that included Dr. Orion Hale. "So it's personal," Lyra murmured. "That complicated things." Her comm unit chimed. "Captain, we've detected a distress beacon. Coordinates match a known raider supply station in the Jovian sector." Lyra's eyes narrowed. Raiders didn't send distress signals unless something had gone catastrophically wrong. "Set course. Full tactical alert." The Stellar Aegis arrived at the coordinates to find chaos. The supply station, a repurposed asteroid hollowed out for habitation, was intact. But the scene inside was one of disarray. Bodies of raiders lay scattered throughout the facility, not killed by weapons fire but by precision hand-to-hand combat. Security systems had been expertly disabled. It looks like a one-man assault, the security officer reported, disbelief evident in his voice. But that's impossible. There are at least 20 raiders stationed here. Lyra surveyed the scene, noting the efficiency of the attack. No wasted movement, no collateral damage. Whoever had done this was trained, military trained. Not impossible, she said quietly. Check the data terminals, see what was accessed. The report came back quickly. Someone had accessed the raiders' communication logs and navigation data, then wiped the systems clean. He's tracking them, Lyra realized. Tracking Black Star. Who, the captain? Dr. Orion Hale. She turned to her executive officer. He's not just a victim. He's hunting them. Back on the stellar Aegis, Lyra called an emergency briefing. Our mission parameters have changed, she informed her senior staff. We're no longer just pursuing the raiders for kidnapping. We're also pursuing Dr. Hale. For what crime, Captain? Her XO asked. For taking the law into his own hands, Lyra replied. And potentially for planning premeditated murder. The words left a bitter taste in her mouth. The Alliance stood for justice, for order in a solar system still reeling from near extinction. Vigilantism undermined everything they were trying to rebuild. Yet part of her, the part that had lost her family during the crisis, understood Hale's motivation. They had killed his dog, his friend, in a universe where connections were rare and precious. Such a loss could drive even the most rational mind to extremes. You set course for the raiders' next likely location, she ordered. We need to find Dr. Hale before he finds Black Star, for his sake as much as theirs. What she didn't say was the thought lingering at the edges of her consciousness. What if Hale was right to hunt them? What if the raiders were involved in something that threatened the fragile peace the Alliance had built? As the stellar Aegis surged through space, Lyra found herself hoping they would find answers before they found bodies. Riker adjusted the neural interface of his stolen raider armor, the discomfort a small price for the disguise it provided. After escaping the raider ship, a feat accomplished through a combination of his military training and an improvised electromagnetic pulse that had disabled his restraints, he had spent days tracking Black Star's organization. The supply station had yielded valuable intelligence. Now, infiltrating a raider outpost on Mars' smaller moon Deimos, he was getting closer to understanding who was really behind the attack on Astra 5. The maintenance bot X-27 requesting access to Central Hub, he intoned, mimicking the flat mechanical cadence of the station's service robots. The voice modulator in his helmet transformed his words into the synthesized speech pattern of an automaton. Access granted, replied the security AI. Proceed to Hub for scheduled diagnostic. Riker moved through the corridors with the precise, measured gait of a machine. Raiders passed him without a second glance. Robots were invisible, beneath notice. It was a blind spot he was exploiting ruthlessly. The Central Hub was a hive of activity. Raiders of various ranks worked at consoles, monitored communications, planned operations. Riker identified the main data terminal and approached it with mechanical purposefulness. Initiating diagnostic, he announced to no one in particular. The raiders nearby barely acknowledged him. As he connected to the terminal, Riker carefully deployed a sub-program designed to slip past security and access classified communications. Behind his helmet, his eyes narrowed as data streamed across his interface. There it was, communication logs between Black Star and his mysterious employer. The messages were heavily encrypted, but one name stood out: Dr. Jonas Crane, director of the Alliance's Genetic Regulation Committee. Riker felt a cold knot form in his stomach. The very organization tasked with preventing misuse of genetic technology was involved with the raiders. It made a twisted kind of sense. Who better to circumvent regulations than those who created them? Hey, bot, a raider lieutenant approached, frowning. What diagnostic are you running? I don't see it on the schedule. Riker's enhanced reflexes took over. Critical system update, he responded in monotone. Scheduled by Chief Engineer Vex at Oro 700. The lieutenant's frown deepened. Vex is on leave. Who authorized? Riker never let him finish. With precision born of years of training, he struck the man's neck, targeting the pressure point that would render him unconscious without permanent damage. The raider dropped without a sound. A security breach in Central Hub, the station AI announced, its calm voice belying the urgency of the situation. Unknown intruder detected. So much for stealth. Riker abandoned the terminal, data secured, and sprinted for the exit. Raiders scrambled to intercept him, weapons drawn. Halt! One shouted. Identify yourself! Instead of answering, Riker launched himself at the group, his movements a blur of lethal efficiency. The first raider went down with a precisely aimed kick to the knee. The second found himself disarmed and unconscious in the span of 2 heartbeats. But there were too many. Energy blasts scorched the air around him as Riker dove for cover behind a console. Intruder cornered in Central Hub, the AI reported. Security response team en route. Riker assessed his options rapidly. Direct combat against an entire outpost was suicide. He needed a diversion. His gaze fell on the environmental controls. With a grim smile, he fired his stolen blaster at the panel. Alarms wailed as the station's atmospheric regulators went haywire. A warning, atmospheric decompression imminent in sections 3 through 7. All personnel evacuate immediately. The resulting chaos was exactly what Riker needed. Raiders abandoned their pursuit, rushing to secure their sections or reach escape pods. In the confusion, Riker slipped away, making for the docking bay. He had almost reached a scout ship when a voice called out, "Not so fast, robot." Riker turned to find a Raider security officer leveling a pulse rifle at him. "Remove the helmet, slowly." For a moment, Riker considered attacking, but the officer kept his distance, weapon steady. A different approach was needed. Complying, Riker said, still in robot monotone. He reached up, disengaging the helmet's seal with deliberate slowness. The officer watched intently, his focus on Riker's hands, a mistake. As the helmet lifted, Riker activated the flash grenade he had palmed earlier, turning his face away as it detonated. The blinding light and concussive force sent the officer reeling. Before he could recover, Riker was on him, a quick strike rendering him unconscious. "Sorry about that," Riker muttered, no longer bothering with the robot voice. "Just business." Minutes later, he was piloting the stolen scout ship away from Deimos, plotting a course toward Earth. If Dr. Jonas Crane was behind the Raiders' interest in his research, Riker needed to understand why, and the answers would be at Alliance headquarters. As the ship accelerated, Riker allowed himself a moment of reflection. The scientist in him was troubled by the violence, by the ease with which he had slipped back into his military training. But when he thought of Shadow, loyal, intelligent Shadow, killed without hesitation, the moral qualms receded. "They killed my dog," he reminded himself softly, "and someone will answer for it." The stars seemed to burn brighter in response, as if acknowledging his vow. Captain Lyra Saul surveyed the aftermath of the Deimos outpost incident with growing concern. Reports indicated a single infiltrator had accessed classified data, injured several raiders, and escaped in a stolen vessel. The description matched what she had come to expect from Dr. Orion Hale: methodical, efficient, and dangerously skilled. "Track the stolen scout ship," she ordered her navigation officer. "Probable destination?" He based on trajectory, Earth, Captains, specifically Alliance headquarters in New Geneva. Lyra's brow furrowed. Why would Hale head directly to the heart of the organization he had abandoned years ago? Unless he send a priority message to headquarters. Alert them to a potential security threat from Dr. Orion Hale. Emphasize that he should be detained, not engaged. Yes, Captain. Lieutenant Vega approached, looking troubled. Captain, there's something else. The data accessed at Deimos included communications between Captain Vorther and someone within the Alliance. Lyra's head snapped up. Who? Unknown. Captain. The records were heavily encrypted, and the raiders wiped most of their systems after the breach. But it suggests that someone in the Alliance is working with the raiders. Lyra finished grimly. This just got a lot more complicated. The Stellar Aegis changed course for Earth, pushing its engines to maximum. If Hale was heading to headquarters with evidence of treachery within the Alliance, he was either going to expose corruption or walking into a trap. Either way, Lyra intended to be there, back in her quarters. She reviewed what they knew about Hale once more. His military record included commendations for tactical thinking and combat efficiency, but also notes about his excessive empathy and reluctance to prioritize mission objectives over ethical considerations. Not the profile of a vengeful killer, yet the trail of incapacitated raiders suggested someone who knew exactly how to hurt people, even if he was choosing not to kill. Lyra's comm unit chimed with an incoming transmission. Encrypted, Alliance High Command. A Captain Saul. The stern face of Admiral Chen filled her screen. Your warning about Dr. Hale has been received. However, new intelligence suggests he may be in possession of sensitive information that poses a security risk to the Alliance. What information, Admiral? Chen's expression remained impassive. That's classified. Captain, your orders are to apprehend Dr. Hale on site and secure any data in his possession. Use of lethal force is authorized if necessary. Lyra kept her face neutral despite her shock. Lethal force against an Alliance citizen, sir. Based on what charges? Treason, Captain. Dr. Hale is suspected of collaborating with the Voidhoof Raiders to steal classified research. That didn't align with anything Lyra had uncovered. With all due respect, Admiral, our intelligence suggests Dr. Hale was kidnapped by the raiders after they killed his research subject. Your intelligence is incomplete, Chen replied coldly. New evidence indicates Hale arranged the raid himself to cover his tracks after selling research secrets. The dog was collateral damage. The explanation felt wrong, but Lyra knew better than to argue with a superior officer without solid evidence. Understood, Admiral. We'll apprehend Dr. Hale and secure any data. After the transmission ended, Lyra sat in silence, her instincts screaming that something was very wrong. The Admiral's story contradicted everything they had discovered about the raid on Astra 5. And the authorization of lethal force against a scientist with no history of violence. It was extreme, even for the post-crisis Alliance. A computer, she said finally. Access all available information on the Genetic Regulation Committee, particularly Dr. Jonas Crane. That information is classified, Captain. Authorization required. Lyra input her command codes, but the computer responded, access denied. Security clearance insufficient. Now that was interesting. Why would information about a regulatory committee be above her clearance level? Computer, when was the classification level of the Genetic Regulation Committee raised? Classification level raised 3 months ago by direct order of Admiral Chen. Lyra's suspicions crystallized into certainty. Whatever was happening, Admiral Chen was involved, and he wanted Hale silenced before he could reveal what he knew. She made her decision. XO, prepare a shuttle. I'm going to headquarters ahead of the ship. Captain? I need to have a conversation with Dr. Hale before anyone else does. She paused. This is off the record. Commander, if questioned, you didn't know my intentions. Her XO studied her face, then nodded slowly. Understood, Captain. Shuttle will be ready in 20 minutes. As Lyra prepared for departure, she knew she was potentially risking her career, maybe even her freedom. But the Alliance was supposed to stand for justice, for the protection of all citizens. If corruption had taken root at the highest levels, someone had to take a stand, and perhaps, she admitted to herself, she wanted to meet the man who had walked away from a military career over ethical principles, only to return to violence when someone he loved was killed. There was a story there, one she needed to understand. The shuttle detached from the stellar aegis, its smaller engines pushing it toward Earth at maximum speed. Lyra only hoped she would arrive in time. New Geneva gleamed in the afternoon sun, its towering spires and domes a testament to humanity's resilience. Built after the crisis on the ruins of the old city, it served as the heart of the Alliance, a symbol of the new order that had emerged from near extinction. Riker observed it from the viewport of a public transport shuttle, having abandoned the stolen raider vessel at a remote docking facility on Mars. His military training had taught him the value of anonymity, the less attention he attracted, the better his chances of reaching Dr. Jonas Crane. The data from the raider outpost had revealed disturbing connections. Crane wasn't just communicating with the raiders, he was directing them, using them to acquire genetic research from facilities across the solar system. But why? The Alliance had strict policies against military applications of genetic modification. Unless those policies were just for show, Riker's shuttle docked at the public terminal, and he disembarked with the flow of civilians. His appearance had been altered, hair dyed, facial structure subtly changed with old military infiltration techniques. To casual observers, he was just another bureaucrat returning from an off-world assignment. Alliance headquarters dominated the city center, a massive complex of interconnected buildings surrounding a central tower that housed the ruling council. Riker knew from his military days that the Genetic Regulation Committee occupied the east wing of the complex. Security was tight, as expected. ID checkpoints, weapon scanners, patrolling guards, all standard. But Riker noticed something unusual. The guards seemed on edge, their movements suggesting heightened alert. They're looking for me, he realized. Somehow they knew he was coming. He needed a new approach. Direct infiltration would likely fail. But there were other ways to reach Crane. Retreating to a public communication terminal. Riker accessed the Alliance directory. Every official had a public contact code for citizen inquiries. It was a long shot, but sometimes the simplest approach was the most effective. Connecting to Genetic Regulation Committee, the terminal announced, please state your inquiry. I need to speak with Dr. Jonas Crane regarding potential violations of genetic research protocols, Riker said, keeping his voice calm and official sounding. There was a pause. Then, Director Crane is unavailable for public inquiries. Please submit your concern in writing to the committee secretary. This is urgent, Riker insisted. It concerns Astra 5 and the Voidhoof Raiders. Another pause, longer this time. Then a different voice, older, authoritative. This is Dr. Crane. Who am I speaking with? Someone who knows about your arrangement with Captain Vorther, Riker replied. Someone who wants answers. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Crane spoke again, his voice lowered. Meet me at the Memorial Gardens in 1 hour. Come alone, unarmed. Any sign of authorities and I'll disappear. The connection terminated. Riker leaned back, considering. It could be a trap. Likely was, in fact. but it was also his best chance to understand why Shadow had died. The Memorial Gardens occupied a quiet corner of New Geneva, a place of reflection dedicated to those lost during the crisis. Stone paths wound through carefully tended flora from across the solar system, each species representing a community that had suffered. Riker arrived early, positioning himself near the central fountain where he could observe all approaches. He was unarmed, as requested, but not defenseless. His enhanced reflexes and training were weapons enough. At precisely the appointed time, a solitary figure entered the gardens, an elderly man with silver hair and the erect posture of someone used to authority. Dr. Jonas Crane moved with deliberate steps, his gaze sweeping the area with the wariness of a hunted man. Riker allowed him to approach the fountain before stepping out from behind a memorial statue. Dr. Crane. Crane didn't startle, merely turned to face him with resigned expectation. Dr. Hale, or should I call you Lieutenant Commander? Just Riker will do. Crane nodded. You've caused quite a stir. The entire Alliance security apparatus is looking for you. Because I know about your deal with the Raiders. Because you know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to understand. Crane gestured to a nearby bench. Shall we sit? My old bones aren't what they used to be. Riker remained standing. Why did you order the raid on Astra 5? Why target my research specifically? Crane sighed heavily. I didn't order the death of your dog, if that's what you're asking. That was Blackstar's decision. He tends toward unnecessary cruelty. The casual dismissal of Shadow's death rekindled Riker's anger. Answer the question. Your research into emotional transference, Crane said, meeting Riker's gaze steadily. It's the missing piece we've been seeking. The key to the next stage of human evolution. We? Who's we? The progressive faction. Those of us who understand that humanity's survival depends on adaptation. Crane leaned forward, intensity breaking through his composed exterior. The crisis nearly wiped us out. Riker, next time, and there will be a next time, we might not survive. Unless we change. Through genetic modification? Precisely. Not just physical enhancements, but psychological ones. Imagine soldiers who can sense each other's emotions, who act as a single coordinated organism. Imagine negotiators who can feel deception. Leaders who can truly understand the needs of their people. Sounds utopian, Riker said flatly. Also sounds like mind control. Crane waved a dismissive hand. A crude characterization. We're talking about expanding human potential, not limiting it, and the Alliance ban on military genetic modifications. A short-sighted policy born of fear. The crisis made people afraid of change, of progress. But we can't afford stagnation. The solar system is vast, resources are limited, and conflicts are inevitable. Riker studied the older man, recognizing the dangerous combination of intelligence and zealotry. So you're using the Raiders to collect research that violates Alliance law, building towards some genetically modified super soldier program. All very patriotic. Mock, if you will, Crane replied calmly. But the progressive faction includes some of the most powerful figures in the Alliance. Admiral Chen, Counselor Vega. We see the bigger picture. And where does Captain Vorther fit in? He doesn't strike me as the idealistic type. The Blackstar is a mercenary. He provides services. We provide payment. Simple. He killed my dog, Riker said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. There's nothing simple about that. For the first time, Crane looked uncomfortable. An unfortunate but minor casualty in a greater cause. Before Riker could respond, a new voice cut through the garden's tranquility. That's enough, Dr. Crane. Both men turned to see a woman approaching, her Alliance captain's uniform unmistakable. Dark hair framed a face that managed to be both striking and severe, her posture radiating authority. Captain Lyra Saul," she introduced herself, eyes flicking between the two men. "And I believe I've heard enough to place you under arrest, Dr. Crane." Crane's expression hardened. "On what charges, Captain?" "Conspiracy, treason, abetting piracy, for starters." Lyra's hand rested on her sidearm, though she hadn't drawn it. "The Alliance takes a dim view of officials who outsource their dirty work to raiders." "You understand nothing," Crane sneered. "The Alliance needs the progressive faction's vision. Without us, humanity will falter, stagnate, eventually perish." "Save it for your trial," Lyra replied coldly. Then, to Riker, "Dr. Hale, I've been tracking you since the raid on Astra 5. I know you didn't collaborate with the raiders. I know about Shadow." The mention of his dog's name sent a pang through Riker. "How did you find us?" "I've been monitoring communications to and from Dr. Crane since discovering his connection to the raiders. When your call came through, I traced it here." She paused. "I came alone. My ship and crew aren't aware of this meeting." "Why would an Alliance captain act independently?" Crane asked, and suspicion evident. "Because the Alliance stands for justice," Lyra said simply. "And what happened at Astra 5 wasn't just..." Before either man could respond, the gardens erupted with activity. Armed figures in Alliance security uniforms swarmed in from all entrances, weapons trained on the trio by the fountain. "Captain Saul, Dr. Crane, step away from the fugitive." The command came from a stern-faced officer at the head of the security team. Lyra's expression flickered with surprise, then understanding. "This isn't my team," she said quietly to Riker. "This is Admiral Chen's doing." Crane smiled thinly. "Did you really think the progressive faction wouldn't have contingencies, Captain? We've been monitoring communications too." The security team advanced. "Weapons ready?" Lyra drew her sidearm, positioning herself beside Riker. "Dr. Hale is under my protection," she announced. "By authority of the Stellar Aegis Command." "Your authority is superseded," the security leader replied. "Admiral Chen has declared Dr. Hale an enemy of the Alliance. Surrender now, or face the consequences." Riker assessed their situation with clinical detachment. Surrounded, outgunned, in the open. The odds were not favorable, yet he felt strangely calm. For the first time since Shadow's death, his path was clear. The corruption went deeper than he had imagined, but now he had an ally, unexpected, but welcome. "Captain," he said softly, "I believe we're about to have our first firefight together." Lyra's lips curved in a grim smile. "So it seems, Doctor. Any suggestions?" "As a matter of fact." Riker's enhanced senses had detected something the security team had missed, the faint whine of approaching engines. "I think our exit strategy just arrived." The sky above the gardens darkened as a vessel descended, sleek, predatory, bearing the unmistakable crimson symbol of the Voidhoof Raiders. "Raiders!" someone shouted, and the security team's attention split between their targets and the new threat. In that moment of confusion, Riker acted. With lightning speed, he grabbed Crane, using the older man as a shield while relieving a nearby guard of his weapon. Beside him, Lyra fired precise shots that disabled rather than killed, the mark of a disciplined officer. "What are the raiders doing here?" Lyra demanded as they took cover behind a stone memorial. "I don't know," Riker admitted. "But I'm guessing it has something to do with our friend Dr. Crane." Crane struggled against Riker's grip. "This isn't Black Star's operation. He wouldn't dare attack Alliance territory without direct orders." "Then who?" The raider ship's hatch opened, and a familiar figure appeared at the entrance. Captain Kane Blackstar Vorther himself, his void eye gleaming even at a distance. Dr. Hale, he called, voice amplified. Time to go! Riker stared in disbelief. He's helping us escape? Why? Because, Crane said with the resignation of a man seeing his plans collapse. He's not just a mercenary. He's progressive faction too. Has been for years. The revelation hit Riker like a physical blow. The man who had killed Shadow was ideologically aligned with the faction that had ordered the raid in the first place. The irony was almost too much to bear. We can't trust him, Lyra said, eyeing the raider ship warily. No, Riker agreed, but right now he's offering the only way out. Security reinforcements were arriving, the gardens becoming a battleground. They needed to move. What about Crane? Lyra asked. Riker looked at the scientist who had set everything in motion. The man whose greater cause had cost Shadow his life. For a moment, the soldier in him whispered dark suggestions. We take him with us, he decided, as insurance, and because he needs to face justice, real justice, not progressive faction justice. Lyra nodded, respect flickering in her eyes. Lead the way, Doctor. They moved through the chaos of the garden, Riker's combat instincts guiding them through gaps in the security cordon. The raider ship hovered low, its boarding ramp extended like an invitation, or a trap. As they approached, Black Star's expression shifted from triumph to confusion at the sight of their hostage. Crane? What's he doing here? A change of plans, Riker called back. We're all coming aboard, unless you'd prefer to explain to your progressive friends why you left their leader to be captured. Black Star's void eye narrowed, calculations visibly running behind it. Finally, he stepped aside. Get in, quickly. They boarded just as Alliance reinforcements arrived in force. The ship lurched upward, engines straining against gravity. Inside, they were met by armed raiders, their weapons trained on the newcomers. Captain, one of them said uncertainly, what are your orders? Black Star studied Riker, Lyra, and the captive Crane with an unreadable expression. Then he smiled, a cold, calculating smile that reminded Riker of why the man was so feared. Take them to the holding cell, he ordered. All of them. It seems our mission parameters have evolved. As they were led away, Riker caught Lyra's eye. A silent understanding passed between them. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but they had survived the first encounter, gained valuable intelligence, and secured a key player in the conspiracy. For now, that would have to be enough. The raider ship ascended into the darkening sky, leaving New Geneva and its gardens behind. Somewhere among the stars, answers awaited, and justice for Shadow. The holding cell aboard Black Star's ship was sparse but not uncomfortable, a practical arrangement for prisoners who might prove valuable. Riker sat on one of the bunks, Lyra beside him, while Crane occupied the opposite side of the small room. Why did Black Star help us escape? Lyra asked, keeping her voice low. If he's progressive faction, why risk exposing their operation? A good question, Riker replied, studying Crane. Care to enlighten us, Doctor? The older scientist sighed, the events of the day having taken their toll. The progressive faction isn't monolithic, Dr. Hale. There are factions within the faction. Those like Admiral Chen who believe in gradual implementation of genetic enhancement, and those like myself who see the need for immediate, comprehensive change. And Black Star? He aligns with my perspective. Chen's intervention at the garden suggests the Admiral has decided I've become a liability. Crane's expression darkened. Politics. Always politics, even when the future of humanity is at stake. Riker considered this. So Black Star rescued us to protect you, but why include us in the package? Because you, Dr. Hale, possess knowledge vital to our cause. Your emotional transference research is the breakthrough we've been seeking. And me? Lyra asked dryly. Crane shrugged. Collateral captain, though perhaps valuable collateral given your rank. The conversation was interrupted as the cell door slid open, revealing Blackstar. The raider captain entered alone, his void eye scanning each of them in turn. Well, he said finally, this is quite the gathering. A disgraced military scientist, an alliance captain, and the head of the progressive faction. If I were the theatrical type, I'd call it the setup for a bad joke. Where are you taking us? Lyra demanded. To safety, Captain Saul, specifically to Nebula Forge, our primary research facility. A raider base? Riker asked skeptically. Blackstar smiled thinly. Much more than that. It's where the future of humanity is being shaped, far from the restrictive policies of the Alliance. It's where you're developing illegal genetic weapons, Lyra corrected. Weapons, therapies, enhancements, labels are so limiting, don't you think? Blackstar turned his attention to Riker. You of all people should understand Dr. Hale. Your work transcends such simplistic categorizations. Riker met the pirate's gaze steadily. My work was meant to heal, to connect, not to control or destroy. Like your work with the dog, Blackstar's voice took on a mocking tone. Such sentiment over an animal. His name was Shadow, Riker said quietly, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. And he was more than just an animal. Yes, your precious experiment. I've reviewed the data we salvaged from Astra 5. Fascinating work, using genetic modification to create empathic bonds between species. Blackstar leaned closer. But did you ever stop to wonder why it worked so well? Why a canine could suddenly sense human emotions with such accuracy? Riker frowned. The therapy targeted specific neural pathways linked to emotional processing. It was a breakthrough, but not inexplicable. Unless, Crane interjected, the subject was already predisposed to such capabilities. What are you talking about? Lyra asked. Blackstar's void eye gleamed. Tell them, Dr. Crane, tell them what you discovered in the dog's genetic makeup. Crane hesitated, then spoke with the measured tone of a scientist presenting findings. Your dog, Dr. Hale, Shadow, wasn't entirely Earth-based. That's impossible, Riker said flatly. I acquired Shadow from a breeding program on Mars. His lineage was documented. Falsified, Crane replied. The breeding program was a progressive faction initiative. The dogs were genetically modified with non-human DNA. The revelation hit Riker like a physical blow. Non-human. You're claiming alien DNA? That's absurd. Is it? Blackstar asked. Your dog's final words to you, what were they again? We not alone among stars. Quite prophetic for a dying canine, wouldn't you say? Riker remembered Shadow's amber eyes. The intelligence that had sometimes seemed beyond even genetic enhancement could explain. The way he had adapted to the emotional transference therapy with unexpected ease. The crisis, Crane continued, wasn't just an asteroid impact. That's the official story. Yes, but the truth is more complex. The asteroid contained material. Biological material unlike anything we'd encountered. Most of it was destroyed on impact, but samples were recovered, studied, eventually incorporated into experimental genetic lines. Including dogs, Riker concluded, the pieces falling into place. You used alien DNA in canine breeding programs. Among others, Crane admitted. The results were mostly disappointing, but Shadow, he was special. His neural architecture showed unique patterns, suggesting potential for interspecies communication far beyond our current technology. Which is why you wanted my research, Riker said, the full picture becoming clear. You didn't just want emotional transference technology. You wanted Shadow himself. His genetic material specifically, Blackstar confirmed. Unfortunately, my men were overzealous during the raid. They murdered him, Riker corrected, his voice hardening. They murdered a being who was potentially the key to understanding the first alien life humanity has encountered. A regrettable loss, Crane said with clinical detachment. But not irreparable. We have samples of his tissue. With your research, we can still achieve our goals. Lyra, who had been listening intently, spoke up. And those goals are what, exactly? Super soldiers? Mind control? Genetic weapons? Survival, Captain. Blackstar replied simply. The universe is vaster and more dangerous than the Alliance acknowledges. The alien material we found was just a fragment, a hint of what exists beyond our solar system. We need to be prepared. By becoming something other than human, Riker asked. By evolving, Crane corrected, and as all successful species must. The cell fell silent as the implications sank in. Riker thought of Shadow, his loyalty, his intelligence, his final warning. Had he somehow sensed his alien heritage? Had he been trying to tell Riker something more important than any of them realized? We'll arrive at Nebula Forge in 6 hours, Blackstar said, moving toward the door. I suggest you rest, Dr. Hale. You'll be expected to assist with the research immediately upon arrival. And if I refuse? Blackstar's expression hardened. Then you'll learn that killing your dog was the least of the cruelties I'm capable of. After he left, Lyra turned to Riker. Do you believe them? About Shadow? About alien DNA? Riker stared at the closed door, his mind racing through memories, analyzing behaviors and patterns he had attributed to his genetic enhancements. I don't know, he admitted, but Shadow was special, different, and his last words. "We not alone among stars," Lyra quoted softly. Yes. Riker met her gaze, seeing the same mixture of awe and apprehension he felt. If it's true, if there is alien life out there, then the progressive faction might have a point about preparation. Lyra finished, but not like this, not through deception and piracy and murder. Across the cell, Crane watched them with the patient expression of a teacher waiting for students to reach an inevitable conclusion. The Alliance would never approve the necessary research openly. Too many ethical concerns, too much potential for panic if the truth about the crisis became public. So you went underground, Riker said. Created a shadow program using the Raiders as your agents. Precisely, and now, Dr. Hale, you have a choice. Join us willingly, help advance humanity's evolution, or be forced, Riker finished. Neither option appeals to me, Dr. Crane. Lyra leaned closer to Riker, her voice dropping to a whisper. We need a plan. Nebula Forge will be heavily guarded, and we don't know the layout. No, Riker agreed on, but I know Blackstar. He's arrogant, overconfident, and he underestimates what I'm capable of. Because of your scientist persona? Partly. Riker's expression darkened. And partly because he thinks killing Shadow broke me, made me vulnerable. Did it? Lyra asked quietly. Riker met her gaze. In the hours they had spent together, first as adversaries, then as reluctant allies, he had come to respect her directness. It changed me, he admitted, but not in the way he thinks. In the depths of space, the Raider ship surged toward Nebula Forge, carrying its unusual passengers toward a confrontation that would determine not just their fates, but potentially the future of humanity itself, and somewhere in the vast emptiness between stars. Riker felt something stir, a sense of purpose that transcended personal vengeance. Shadow's death would be avenged, Yes, but perhaps his legacy would be something greater than either of them could have imagined. Tsennobuman. Nebula Forge loomed against the backdrop of space, a massive structure built into the remnants of a captured asteroid. Unlike the utilitarian designs of Alliance facilities, the Forge was an intimidating blend of function and psychological warfare, jagged spires, ominous lighting, and docking bays that resembled gaping maws. Impressive, isn't it? Blackstar said as he led Riker, Lyra, and Crane from the shuttle bay into the heart of the facility. Built from the wreckage of pre-crisis space stations repurposed to serve our needs. You mean the progressive faction's needs, Lyra corrected, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings, mapping escape routes and security measures with the instincts of a trained officer. The distinction is meaningless here. Captain, Blackstar replied. On Nebula Forge, the Raiders and the faction are one and the same. They pass through corridors filled with activity. Raiders in combat gear, scientists in lab coats, automated systems humming with purpose. It was a militarized research facility, combining the worst aspects of both worlds. Our primary laboratories, Blackstar announced as they entered a vast chamber filled with advanced equipment, where the future is being shaped. Riker took in the scene with a scientist's eye. Gene sequencers, neural mappers, biomechanical interfaces. The technology was cutting edge, some of it beyond even what he had access to at Astra 5. But there was something else, something that made his skin crawl. Containment units lining the walls, many occupied by shadowy forms. Test subjects? He asked, unable to keep the disgust from his voice. Volunteers, Crane said quickly. Those who understand the importance of our work. And if they change their minds, Lyra challenged. Progress requires sacrifice, Captain, Blackstar said dismissively. Surely a military officer understands that concept. He led them to a separate laboratory, smaller but even more advanced. Your workspace, Dr. Hale. Everything you need to continue your emotional transference research. At the center of the lab was a containment unit similar to those they had passed. Inside, suspended in transparent fluid, was a small, dark object, a tissue sample. Riker realized, from Shadow. You bastard, he breathed, anger flaring. A term that implies parentage, Blackstar replied coolly. Something neither of us can claim with certainty anymore, given our experiments with the alien genetic material. Crane approached the sample, his scientific curiosity overriding any moral considerations. This is remarkable. The neural structure is unlike anything I've seen, a perfect bridge between human and alien cognitive patterns, which is why we need your research, Dr. Hale. Blackstar said, your emotional transference therapy, combined with this genetic material, could create the next evolutionary step for humanity. Super soldiers who can sense each other's emotions, Riker said flatly. Fighting as a unified organism. Wasn't that your vision, Dr. Crane? Among other applications, yes. Lyra, who had remained silent, studying the laboratory, spoke up. And the Alliance? What happens when they discover your operation? They already suspect, Blackstar admitted. Why do you think Admiral Chen was so eager to capture Dr. Hale? The progressive faction isn't the only group that recognizes the potential of this research. Chen wants it for himself, Riker realized, his faction of the faction. Precisely. The struggle isn't between the Alliance and the Raiders, Dr. Hale. It's between those who would use this power responsibly and those who would abuse it. And you consider yourself in the former category? Lyra asked incredulously. Blackstar's void eye gleamed. I consider myself a realist, Captain. The universe doesn't care about human moral frameworks. Survival is the only imperative that matters. Riker approached the containment unit, studying Shadow's preserved tissue. Even in death, his friend was being exploited, treated as nothing more than a research specimen. The anger that had driven him since the raid on Astra 5 crystallized into something colder, more focused. "I'll need access to my original research data," he said, turning to Blackstar, "and samples of the alien genetic material you recovered from the crisis impact." Blackstar exchanged a glance with Crane, suspicion warring with desire for Riker's cooperation. "You'll have supervised access," he decided. "Nothing leaves this laboratory without my approval." "And Captain Saul?" Riker asked, nodding toward Lyra. "It will remain as our guest until we're certain of your cooperation." Blackstar's expression hardened. "Don't test me, Dr. Hale. I spared you once because of your value to our research. That protection extends only as far as your usefulness." After Blackstar and Crane left, accompanied by armed guards, Riker turned to Lyra. "They'll separate us soon," he said quietly. "When they do, be ready." "For what?" she asked, keeping her voice equally low. "We're in the heart of a raider stronghold, surrounded by hostiles, with no weapons and no backup." "Not entirely accurate," Riker replied, his eyes on the containment unit holding Shadow's tissue. "We have something they don't understand. Something Shadow tried to tell me before he died." "The alien connection?" "More than that." Riker moved closer to the unit, examining the neural patterns visible in the holographic display. Shadow's final message wasn't just about aliens existing, it was about a capability. Something in his genetic structure that the progressive faction hasn't identified yet. Lyra frowned. "What capability?" "In my research, I discovered an unusual energy signature in Shadow's neural tissue. I called it the still living ray, a form of biophotonic energy that seemed to facilitate his enhanced cognition. I thought it was a side effect of my genetic modifications, but now—" "You think it's alien in origin?" Lyra concluded. "Yes, and I think it's more powerful than anyone realizes." Riker's expression grew determined. "If I can activate it, harness it—" "You could what? Fight your way through an entire raider base?" "Something like that," Riker said grimly. "But I need time, and I need you to be ready when the opportunity comes." Before Lyra could respond, the laboratory door slid open, and armed raiders entered. "Captain Saul," one announced, "you're being transferred to secure quarters." Lyra met Riker's eyes one last time, a silent communication passing between them. Then she allowed herself to be led away, her posture that of a soldier assessing, preparing, waiting for the moment to strike. Alone in the laboratory, Riker turned to the task at hand. Revenge had driven him across the solar system, but now something larger was at stake. Shadow's death would be avenged, yes, but his legacy might save far more than one man's soul. With methodical precision, Riker began to work. Hours melted into days as Riker immersed himself in the research. Under the watchful eyes of raider guards and progressive faction scientists, he analyzed Shadow's tissue sample, comparing it to the alien genetic material recovered from the Crisis asteroid. The similarities were undeniable. Shadow's DNA contained sequences that defied conventional genetics, structures that suggested capabilities far beyond terrestrial evolution. And at the center of it all was the still living ray, the biophotonic energy that had made Shadow unique. "Fascinating progress, Dr. Hale," Crane observed on the third day, reviewing Riker's findings. "You've identified neural pathways we completely overlooked." Riker kept his expression neutral. "The emotional transference therapy created unexpected synergies with Shadow's unique genetic structure. It's not just about sensing emotions, it's about energy transfer. quantum entanglement at a biological level. And the military applications? Potentially revolutionary, Riker replied, choosing his words carefully. Soldiers linked by this technology wouldn't just sense each other's emotions, they could share energy, strength, even healing. Crane's eyes lit with scientific fervor. Imagine it, a squad that functions as a single organism, sharing resources as needed, injured members drawing strength from the collective. Precisely, Riker agreed, feeding the older scientist's enthusiasm while concealing his true intentions. But to fully activate the potential, I need direct access to the primary alien sample. Crane hesitated. That's problematic. The original sample is highly secured. Black Star controls access personally. Then speak with him. Explain the potential breakthrough. Riker leaned forward, injecting urgency into his voice. We're close, Dr. Crane. So close to achieving what the progressive faction has worked toward for years. After Crane left to consult with Black Star, Riker allowed himself a moment of reflection. The plan was taking shape, but the most dangerous parts lay ahead. He thought of Lyra, isolated in her secure quarters, waiting for his signal. He had seen her only briefly in passing since their separation, but the determination in her eyes had been unmistakable. And he thought of Shadow, loyal, intelligent Shadow, whose genetic legacy might yet change the course of human history. They killed my dog, he whispered to the empty laboratory, and the stars will burn for it, but not in the way Black Star expected. That night, Riker was escorted to a meeting with Black Star and Crane in the facility's command center. The cavernous room overlooked Nebula Forge's main docking bay, where raider ships came and went in carefully choreographed patterns. Dr. Crane tells me you've made a breakthrough, Black Star said without preamble. Something about the still-living ray and its potential applications. I've identified the activation mechanism. Riker confirmed, but to proceed, I need access to the primary alien sample. The tissue from Shadow isn't sufficient for a full-scale test. Black Star's void eye studied him with mechanical intensity. You've become quite the cooperative researcher, Dr. Hale. A remarkable transformation from the man who swore vengeance for his dog. Your science transcends personal grievances, Riker replied smoothly. Shadow's death was regrettable, but his legacy could transform humanity. That matters more than revenge. How noble, Black Star said, skepticism evident in his tone. And convenient. I'm a scientist first, Riker insisted, always have been. Black Star exchanged a glance with Crane, silent communication passing between them. Finally, he nodded. Very well. You'll have supervised access to the primary sample tomorrow. But understand this. Dr. Hale, any deviation from authorized protocols will have severe consequences. Of course, Riker agreed. I wouldn't dream of jeopardizing the research. As he was escorted back to his quarters, a Spartan room that was more cell than living space, Riker allowed himself a small smile. The trap was set. Now he just needed the right moment to spring it. That moment came sooner than expected. In the early hours of the next day, as Riker was preparing for his access to the primary alien sample, alarms blared throughout Nebula Forge. Alert, Alliance vessels detected, defensive position, this is not a drill. The radar guard assigned to Riker received urgent communications through his helmet, then turned to the scientist with obvious tension. Change of plans. You're to be secured in the emergency bunker until the situation is resolved. What's happening? Riker asked, feigning ignorance. Alliance attack, multiple vessels. The guard checked his weapon nervously. Move, now! As they hurried through corridors filled with raiders rushing to battle stations, Riker's enhanced senses picked up fragments of communication. Stellar Aegis leading the assault. Captain Saul's crew. Breach in Sectors 3 and 7. So Lyra's ship had come looking for her. Perfect timing. The chaos of battle preparation provided the distraction Riker needed. As they passed a maintenance junction, he struck, a precise blow to the guard's neck that rendered him unconscious without permanent damage. Dragging the man into a service alcove, Riker appropriated his weapon and communication device. "Now for Phase 2, he muttered, setting off toward the secure laboratories where both Lyra and the primary alien sample were held. The battle began in earnest as Riker made his way through the facility. The Alliance forces had launched a multi-pronged assault, targeting key systems and creating confusion among the Raider defenders. Explosions rocked the asteroid base, emergency systems wailing in protest. Riker reached the detention level first, using the stolen communication device to bluff his way past checkpoints. Lyra's cell was guarded by a single Raider, easily neutralized. "Took you long enough," she said as he opened her cell, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. "You had to wait for the right dramatic moment," Riker replied, handing her the guard's weapon. "Your crew has excellent timing." "Not my doing," Lyra admitted, "but I'm not complaining, so what's the plan?" "We need to reach the primary sample laboratory. I can use Shadow's genetic material to activate the still-living ray. Create a pulse that will disrupt the Raiders' neural systems while boosting our own." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "That sounds impossible. It would be without the alien DNA. But Shadow showed me it's possible, his final gift. Together, they fought their way toward the secure laboratories, Riker's military training and Lyra's combat experience making them a formidable team. The Raiders, divided between defending against the Alliance assault and internal security, couldn't mount an effective resistance. They reached the laboratory to find it already occupied by Black Star and Crane, hastily preparing to evacuate with the primary sample. "Dr. Hale," Black Star said, his void eye glowing with malevolence. "I should have known your cooperation was too good to be true." "You killed my dog," Riker replied simply. "Did you really think I'd help you?" "I thought you were a scientist," Black Star sneered. "Rational, logical." "I am," Riker agreed, "but I'm also human. Something you seem to have forgotten in your quest for evolution." Black Star drew his weapon, a sleek, deadly energy pistol that hummed with power. "Humanity is weakness, Dr. Hale. The universe doesn't reward sentiment or mercy." "Maybe not," Riker conceded. "But it doesn't mean we abandon those qualities. They're what make us human in the first place." Lyra had her weapon trained on Crane, who stood frozen beside the containment unit holding the primary alien sample. "It's over, Dr. Crane. The Alliance knows about the progressive faction, about your experiments. Admiral Chen has already been detained." "You understand nothing," Crane spat. "The alien material is just the beginning. There's more out there, entities that make humanity look like insects. We need this research to survive." Not like this," Riker said firmly, "not through deception and cruelty." Black Star's patience snapped. With lightning reflexes, he fired at Riker, the energy blast narrowly missing as Riker dove for cover. The laboratory erupted into chaos, Lyra exchanging fire with Crane, who had produced a weapon of his own, while Riker and Black Star engaged in a deadly dance around the sensitive equipment. "You're good, Doctor," Black Star acknowledged as they circled each other. "Military training shows, but I've been fighting since the crisis. You're outmatched." "Maybe," Riker admitted, "but I have something you don't." "And what's that?" "A purpose beyond survival." With that, Riker launched himself at Black Star, their combat becoming a brutal close-quarters struggle. Meanwhile, Lyra had subdued Crane, the older scientist nursing a wound to his shoulder. Riker, she called. Whatever you're planning with the sample, do it now. Alliance forces are breaching the central hub. Riker, locked in combat with Blackstar, couldn't break away. The activation sequence, it's already programmed. Just press the green control panel by Shadow's sample. Lyra moved to comply. But Blackstar, seeing her intention, broke free from Riker with desperate strength. No! He roared, firing wildly. The energy blast caught Lyra in the side, sending her crashing against the laboratory wall. Riker's rage exploded at the sight of her falling, his attacks becoming a blur of precision and fury. Blackstar, for all his experience, found himself driven back by the onslaught. This is for Shadow, Riker growled, landing a devastating blow that sent Blackstar reeling. And this is for Lyra. The second strike knocked Blackstar's weapon from his hand. The Raider captain stumbled back against the containment unit holding the primary alien sample, his void eye frantically scanning for an escape route. It doesn't have to end like this, Blackstar said, raising his hands. We want the same thing, Dr. Hale, humanity's survival. No, Riker replied coldly. You want power, control, I want justice. With a final decisive strike, Riker incapacitated Blackstar, the Raider captain collapsing in an unconscious heap. Immediately, Riker rushed to Lyra's side, relief washing over him as he found her wounded but alive. The activation sequence, she reminded him, her voice strained. Before reinforcements arrive, Riker helped her to a sitting position against the wall, then moved to the control panel. With swift, precise movements, he initiated the sequence he had secretly programmed during his days of apparent cooperation. The laboratory hummed with energy as both containment units, one holding Shadow's tissue, the other the primary alien sample, began to glow with an eerie blue light. The still living ray, dormant until now, awakened. What exactly will this do? Lyra asked, watching as the light intensified. The alien DNA contains a form of quantum entanglement, a connection that transcends physical limitations. Riker explained, monitoring the process. Shadow's tissue sample still carries the emotional imprint of our bond. When I activate the ray using both samples, it will create a pulse that disrupts aggressive neural patterns while enhancing cooperative ones. You're going to... What? Make the Raiders stop fighting? Not exactly. More like giving everyone a moment of clarity, a chance to see beyond their immediate impulses. Riker's expression softened. It's what Shadow would have wanted. Not vengeance, but understanding. The light from the containment units grew blindingly bright, then coalesced into a pulsing sphere of energy hovering between them. Riker felt a familiar presence, not quite Shadow, but an echo of his loyal companion's essence. Goodbye, old friend, he whispered as he pressed the final activation control. The sphere expanded rapidly, passing through the laboratory walls as if they didn't exist, encompassing the entire Nebula Forge facility. As it touched each person, Raider, scientist, Alliance soldier, it created a momentary connection, a flash of empathic understanding. In the command center, Dr. Crane, who had been led there by guards after his capture, suddenly staggered as the wave hit him. For the first time in years, he felt the full weight of his actions. The lives disrupted, the ethical boundaries crossed, all in the name of progress. Throughout the facility, similar scenes played out. Raiders lowered their weapons, confronted by the humanity of their opponents. Alliance soldiers paused, glimpsing the genuine fear that had driven much of the progressive faction's desperate research. And on the bridge of his flagship, Blackstar, having been transported there by loyal guards after his defeat in the laboratory, experienced the most profound shift of all. As the wave washed over him, He saw Shadow not as an experiment or a means to an end, but as a sentient being who had formed a bond of trust and love with Riker. He felt the pain of that bond's severance, the void left by Shadow's death. For a moment, the battle for Nebula Forge ceased, all participants linked in a web of shared understanding. In the laboratory, Riker helped Lyra to her feet as the energy wave dissipated. "Did it work?" she asked. Before Riker could answer, the facility's communication system crackled to life. Blackstar's voice, strangely subdued, filled the room. "This is Captain Vorther to all Raider forces. Stand down. I repeat, stand down." A pause, then, "This conflict ends now." Riker and Lyra exchanged glances of disbelief. The wave affected him, Riker realized, more deeply than I anticipated. "Alliance forces, this is Captain Vorther," Blackstar continued. "I surrender Nebula Forge and all progressive faction research conducted here. On one condition, safe passage for my crew. They followed orders. The responsibility is mine alone." The laboratory door slid open, and armed Alliance soldiers entered, weapons ready but not firing. At their head was Commander Vega, Lyra's executive officer. Captain Saul," he exclaimed with evident relief. "We thought you were—" He stopped, noticing her wound. "Medic! We need a medic here!" As Alliance medical personnel tended to Lyra, Vega turned to Riker. "Dr. Hale, we have orders to take you into protective custody, and to secure all research related to something called the Still Living Ray." Riker nodded wearily. "It's over. The research, the samples, they should be destroyed. Some knowledge isn't worth the cost. That decision will be made by Alliance Command." Vega replied diplomatically. "For now, we need to get you both to safety." As they were escorted from the laboratory, Riker cast one last look at Shadow's tissue sample, still glowing faintly with the alien energy that had made him unique. "Goodbye," he whispered again, feeling a sense of closure that had eluded him since the raid on Astra 5. The battle for Nebula Forge ended not with destruction, but with an unprecedented ceasefire. Blackstar surrendered himself to Alliance custody, while his crew was granted amnesty in exchange for cooperation. The progressive faction's clandestine operations were exposed, leading to investigations at the highest levels of Alliance leadership. And the truth about the crisis, about the alien material that had arrived with the asteroid, became public knowledge, sparking debate and soul-searching throughout human society. Through it all, Riker found himself at the center of a storm of questions, debriefings, and ethical discussions. The Alliance wanted to understand the still living ray, to determine if it could be weaponized or used for peace. Politicians argued over the implications of alien contact, however indirect. Military leaders demanded preparations for potential future encounters. But Riker, having fulfilled his vow to avenge Shadow, found his priorities shifting. The rage that had driven him across the solar system had been replaced by something else, a determination to honor Shadow's legacy in a more constructive way. And he wasn't alone in that journey. 3 months after the Battle of Nebula Forge, as it came to be known, Riker stood at the observation deck of the newly established Shadow Memorial Institute. The facility, built on the site of the former Astra 5 station, gleamed with purpose against the backdrop of Mercury's barren landscape. Quite a view," Lyra said, joining him at the viewport. Her captain's uniform had been replaced by civilian attire, the insignia of the Alliance Diplomatic Corps subtle on her collar. "Though I still think Earth would have been a more practical location." Riker smiled. Shadow loved watching the stars from here, said they looked different from Mercury's orbit, more alive somehow. Lyra's expression softened. After weeks of recovery from her wound, followed by testimony before the Alliance Council regarding the progressive faction. She had emerged changed, less the rigid military officer, more the thoughtful leader. "The first research teams arrive tomorrow," she noted. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Riker replied. "Leading a team is different from solo research, especially with the scrutiny we'll be under." The Shadow Memorial Institute had been established with a specific mandate: to study interspecies communication and peaceful applications of genetic research. Under the watchful eye of the reformed Alliance Genetic Oversight Committee, no longer led by progressive faction sympathizers, Riker would lead efforts to understand the implications of Shadow's unique genetic heritage. "You'll do fine," Lyra assured him, her hand finding his. "The Council was impressed by your ethical stance, even after everything that happened. That's why they approved this institute despite the controversy." Riker's thoughts turned to Blackstar and Crane, both now serving sentences for their roles in the progressive faction's illegal operations. The former Raider captain had surprised everyone with his full cooperation, providing details that had helped dismantle the faction's remaining cells. During Riker's one visit to Blackstar's detention facility, the man had said something unexpected. "I still believe humanity needs to evolve to survive, but I was wrong about how. Your dog taught me that." The still living ray, as Riker had insisted, had been secured rather than weaponized. Samples remained for research, but under stringent controls that he himself had helped design. Never again would Shadow's legacy be corrupted for military purposes. "Do you think we'll find them?" Lyra asked, her gaze on the stars beyond the viewport. "The aliens whose DNA was in the asteroid?" "I don't know," Riker admitted. The sample was old, possibly millions of years old. Whatever civilization created it might be long gone. He paused, considering. "But Shadow believed we weren't alone. That means something." "It means everything," Lyra corrected gently. "It means we need to be ready, not with weapons or genetic modifications, but with understanding, with empathy." Riker turned from the stars to look at her, still somewhat amazed by the connection that had formed between them. From adversaries to allies to something deeper, their journey had been unexpected but somehow inevitable. "Speaking of empathy," he said, "the first litter of puppies from the new breeding program will be ready for imprinting next week. I was hoping you might help with their socialization." Lyra's eyes lit up. "The ones with Shadow's preserved DNA sequence? I'd be honored." The breeding program was another aspect of the Institute's work, creating a new generation of companion animals with enhanced cognitive abilities, but without the military applications the progressive faction had envisioned. These dogs would be partners in exploration, in healing, in building bridges between species, a fitting tribute to Shadow, as they stood together, watching the stars that had once seemed cold and distant but now held new meaning. Riker felt a sense of peace that had eluded him since that terrible day on Astra 5. The rage had burned itself out, replaced by purpose. The thirst for vengeance had been quenched, leaving room for hope. "They killed my dog," he said softly. The words no longer a vow of revenge but a simple statement of fact. "And the stars burned for it, but not in the way I expected." "How so?" Lyra asked, leaning slightly against him. "I thought they'd burn with destruction, with my rage." Riker's gaze returned to the brilliant points of light beyond the viewport. "Instead, they're burning with possibility, with the future Shadow helped us see." Lyra's hand tightened around his. "A future worth fighting for. Worth living for," Riker corrected. "That's what Shadow would have wanted." As if in response, the stars seemed to pulse brighter for a moment. A trick of light, perhaps, or something more, in the vastness of space, where humanity was still learning its place, Anything was possible, including healing, including hope, including love, blooming like a rare and precious flower in the aftermath of loss. Riker and Lyra stood together at the threshold of that future, their path illuminated by stars that no longer burned with vengeance, but with promise. And somewhere, in whatever realm existed beyond mortal understanding, Shadow watched over them, guide, guardian, friend. The story of one man and his dog had become something larger, a chapter in humanity's ongoing journey among the stars. A reminder that even in the coldest depths of space, the warmth of connection could survive, could thrive, could transform universes one heart at a time. The end.